Now we turn back to Michelangelo to think about his relationship to Mannerism. And of course, he's really the one who started this Mannerist turn with his figura serpentina, right? With his vision of the body rendered into a dramatically twisting form that was unnatural, but a very brilliant concept of an artistic vision, an unnatural kind of beauty. And so we come back to Florence with Michelangelo returned to Florence, and we will see how he creates a Mannerist vision, not in painting, but in architecture. So we have to look here at our site, which is the Church of San Lorenzo, because we're going back to the church that Brunelleschi had made the origin point of classicizing architecture. So Michelangelo returns, but we have to start with some history here because he's going back to Florence and a lot has happened in a brief space of time. Keep in mind, this is a time period of tremendous political turmoil and military conflict. So he comes back to Florence, and the textbook tells us this is after the Medici had regained power in Florence in 1512. Understand that the Medici had steadily been amassing greater wealth, power, and status. They did this to a great extent through marriages. As you have learned, marriage was about enhancing and extending power. As the Medici gained power, their role in Florence had slowly changed, and they, in turn, changed the city. In the 1400s, back in the time of Brunelleschi, building San Lorenzo, the Medici had steadily gained a degree of dominance in the Florence City Council. And over that century, their dominance began to an extent to undercut the Republican ideals. And in fact, they were then exiled in 1494 because the French were attempting to invade, and the Medici sided with the French, choosing power or a desire to enhance their power by access to French royal power over the Republican civic duty of the people of Florence. So the Medici then get back in and they seize power again because their family had gained so much influence, partly in the power structure of the Catholic Church as cardinals. They were able to get the backing of Pope Julius II to help them reestablish themselves in Florence. And then, as you see here, a Medici, Giovanni de' Medici, becomes Pope, succeeding Julius II in 1513. He will take the name as a Pope of Leo X. And here is a painting of Leo X, this Medici Pope, reminding us of the power of textiles, these incredible crimson red fabrics, velvets, and silks that create his aura of magnificence as a prince, since the Pope is a prince of a territory. And look at this exquisite rendering of the book that he's reading. And then another Medici, Pope Clement VII, will succeed Leo. And I wanted you to meet these popes because I want you to understand that during their papal reigns, tremendous conflict is going on in the Christian world around the authority and the corruptions of the Pope. We'll come back to that, but let's focus on the Medici and Michelangelo. So Michelangelo is given the commission to be the chief architect for their family projects at our old friend, the Church of San Lorenzo. This includes tombs for these great Medici famous people, which are ultimately never finished, right? So this is our interesting point about the Renaissance, where we have very grand, ambitious projects that are sometimes too grand to be realized. And we saw that with the tragedy of the tomb for Pope Julius II. But I want to come down here and look at the vestibule of the library that was added to the Church of San Lorenzo, because this is where we see Mannerism in terms of architecture. So refresh your memory about the Church of San Lorenzo that Brunelleschi designed, because Michelangelo is very aware of being in dialogue with this major monument of classicizing architecture and its order and harmony. So the nave, we looked at the interior of the church with the transept, the square sanctuary. This had a design that started in the old sacristy, and the new sacristy is where those unfinished tombs get constructed. But there's also this library that's added, that's perpendicular to the main church. And what Michelangelo does is he creates an entrance way. You see here, entrance staircase, vestibule, a transition space. And he also designs the interior. So that's where we can see him doing architecture in a Mannerist way. So here, if you see the textbook discussion, they're talking about Michelangelo coordinating his work with a decorative tradition established at San Lorenzo when Brunelleschi designed the church a century earlier, using stylized architectural elements carved in dark gray pietra serena. The serene stone, that gray stone that Brunelleschi loved, it reappears here and would readily have been a reference to Brunelleschi's vision to anyone who saw it. And now they say, however, Michelangelo plays with the classical architectural etiquette that Brunelleschi had used to create such clarity, harmony, and balance. In Michelangelo's vestibule, chunky columns are recessed into rectangular wall niches that can barely contain them. They are crowded and overlapped. Let's stop to think about this. So here are these columns set into niches, crammed in, crowded. This is so different than the columns that have their beautiful, carefully measured space in the church. These don't have any clear functional purpose, and they do not have a harmonious sense of space. These columns are a kind of rhythmic interval of solid and space, solid and space. These are columns that seem to have lost their purpose, and they're just simply creating a sense of congestion and heaviness. Even though this is the pietra serena, the serene stone, they don't feel serene. Neither do the windows, which are blind. They're closed. We have these beautiful round windows inside the church that let in the clear light of reason. Reason and rational purposes have been drained away. There's no clear reason to have these closed windows, to have these columns that are just jammed in there and not holding up the roof in any clear fashion. And then, of course, what's most dramatic is this amazing staircase, which completely defies what a staircase is supposed to do. A staircase is supposed to go up, help you ascend into the library. This feels like it's pouring down. You have a downward feeling like lava coming out of a volcano, a heaviness. And so interestingly, Michelangelo has played with the curved against the rectangular, or the circular against the square that you saw Brunelleschi do, but you don't have a sense of a lofty mind creating order out of disorder. You actually feel that all of these elements create a sense of disorder. So what's interesting is if once you go up that heavy staircase and you fight against that downward energy, you step into an interior space that actually is very classicizing in its kind of orderly rhythm of even measurements, of symmetrical components, clear windows letting in light. So this is the interior reading room. And in a sense, Michelangelo has created a purposeful contrast that is a kind of allegory for the condition of ignorance before you attain knowledge and the kind of open, light-filled mind of knowledge, as if he's trying to dramatize the work that must be done to overcome the heavy blindness, the inertia of ignorance, to attain the light of reason. And as Mannerist architecture, we can see that it is actually deconstructing everything that was valuable to classicizing architecture, undoing it, because now we have bizarre deviations from the classical norms. We have strange and illogical elements. And we have Michelangelo working around a concetto, which is a clever concept, a kind of overriding theme, and using artistic invention as his focus rather than working toward clarity and grace.